You think you've had a bad year? Try living in a decade where the sun stopped working. 74,000 years ago, your entire species almost disappeared from the face of the earth. Not slowly, not over generations or centuries, in a surprisingly short window of time. And the scar from that event, it's still inside you, right now. Written into your DNA. You carry it in every single cell of your body, and you don't even know it's there. This is the story of the closest humanity ever came to total extinction, and how the fact that you exist at all is basically a miracle. It all started with a mountain. Toba, a supervolcano sitting on the island of Sumatra in what is now Indonesia. 74,000 years ago, it erupted, and when I say erupted, I don't mean lava and ash clouds like you see on the news. No, this was something else entirely. Toba ejected roughly 2,800 cubic kilometers of rock and ash into the atmosphere. For reference, Mount St. Helens in 1980, that was 1 cubic kilometer. Toba was nearly 3,000 times larger. Just think about that for a second. I mean, the explosion alone would have been heard across entire continents. A wall of superheated gas and rock raced outward at hundreds of kilometers per hour. Anything within range didn't have time to react, didn't have time to escape. Everything within a few hundred kilometers was incinerated and buried under 30 feet of ash. But the explosion wasn't the worst part, not even close. So the ash goes up and it just keeps going up through the troposphere into the stratosphere. A blanket of sulfur dioxide and fine volcanic particles spreading across the entire planet, like a slow gray curtain closing over the sun. And then the temperature dropped. Volcanic winter. Global temperatures may have plunged by as much as 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. In some regions, possibly 10 to 15 degrees. That doesn't sound like much until you realize what it actually means on the ground. Imagine waking up tomorrow and it's winter. Not the kind where you put on a coat, the kind where nothing grows, where the rain turns to ash, where the rivers run gray. Forests died, not just leaves falling, entire ecosystems collapsing. Grasslands turned to dust, fruit disappeared. The animals that ate the fruit disappeared. The predators that ate those animals starved next. A chain reaction of ecological collapse rippling outward from a single point in Southeast Asia until it touched every corner of the world your ancestors called home. Like, imagine waking up and the sun looks wrong. Dimmer, redder. The air tastes like metal and it doesn't go back to normal. Not the next day, not the next week, not the next month, not the next year. For 6 to 10 years the skies stayed dark. Some estimates say longer. Now, here's where it gets personal. Your ancestors were out there, scattered across Africa and possibly parts of Asia. Small bands of Homo sapiens, maybe a few 100,000 total on the entire planet. No cities, no grain stores, no technology beyond stone tools and fire. And the food was vanishing. Not gradually, not in a way you could plan for. The plants they gathered were dying. The animals they hunted were starving, migrating to places they couldn't follow. Water sources were choked with ash or drying up completely. You're not reading about this in a history book. You are there, standing in a landscape that used to feed your entire clan, and now it's gray, silent, dead. The bones of animals you used to hunt are scattered in the dust. The fruit trees are bare. The rivers taste like poison. Your children are hungry. They've been hungry for days. Your elders are weakening. The hunters come back empty-handed again. Third day in a row. Nobody says it out loud, but everyone is thinking the same thing. And the crazy part, nobody knows why. There's no explanation for what's happening. No science, no weather forecast, no one to tell you that a mountain exploded 6,000 kilometers away and poisoned the sky. All you know is that the world is dying, and you're dying with it. Geneticist Stanley Ambrose at the University of Illinois proposed something in 1998 that shook the field of human evolution. He looked at the genetic diversity of modern humans and found something that shouldn't be possible. We are too similar. Look at chimpanzees. A single group of chimps in West Africa has more genetic diversity than the entire human species combined. All 8 billion of us. Every race, every ethnicity, every population on every continent, genetically, we're practically identical. The only explanation, a bottleneck. A single moment in history when the human population crashed so catastrophically low that the gene pool nearly drained completely. Ambrose connected it to Toba. His theory, and it remains one of the most debated in all of human evolution, to be fair, suggests that the global population of Homo sapiens may have dropped to as few as 3 to 10,000 breeding individuals. Some estimates go even lower, a few thousand humans. On the entire planet. Here's the thing. That means every single person alive today, all 8 billion of us, likely descended from that tiny group of survivors. Everyone you've ever met, every stranger on the street, every face on your screen. All traceable back to a handful of humans who somehow didn't die when the sky went dark and the world stopped growing food. And somehow is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. Because here's the reality. Surviving Toba wasn't about being the strongest, or the fastest, or the luckiest. It was about one thing. The one thing that separates humans from every other species that lived through the same catastrophe and didn't make it: cooperation. When the food ran out, some species scattered, they ran, they fought each other for scraps, and they died alone. Your ancestors did the opposite. They pulled closer together. Not out of kindness, out of desperation. The groups that survived were the ones that shared food when everyone was starving, that carried the sick when it meant walking slower, that stayed together when it would have been so much easier to abandon the weakest and run. This wasn't heartwarming. This was brutal math. A mother splitting her last meal with her child while her own ribs were showing through her skin. An elder being dragged through an ash-covered wasteland because no one could bring themselves to leave him. People sharing food with strangers, not because they were generous, but because alone meant dead. And it worked. The cooperators survived. The loners didn't. But here's what nobody tells you. The genes that kept your ancestors alive during Toba, the ones that made them hoard calories, stay hypervigilant, cling to their group, those genes are still running inside you, right now. That urge to overeat when you're stressed, that's your body stockpiling fuel for a famine that ended 70,000 years ago. That anxiety you feel when you're alone, that's your brain screaming the same warning it screamed in volcanic winter. Isolated means dead. That craving for belonging, for tribe, for people who feel like yours, that's not weakness. That's Toba. The survival instincts that saved your species are the same ones making you sick in a world that no longer needs them. Okay, here's what makes this personal. And I mean genuinely personal. Your body carries the receipt. The reason human genetic diversity is so shockingly low, the reason a blood transfusion from a stranger on the other side of the planet can save your life, is because you're basically family. All of you, every human alive, is the descendant of a tiny band of survivors who made it through the darkest chapter in our species' history. And honestly, you didn't earn that. None of us did. Someone 74,000 years ago starved so that their child could eat. Someone carried a sick elder through an ash-covered wasteland because leaving them behind wasn't something they could do. Someone shared their last handful of food with a person who wasn't even their own blood. And because they did, you're here, sitting somewhere comfortable, well-fed, safe, carrying a body full of survival genes that have nothing left to fight. If you want to keep discovering the brutal history written inside your own body, hit subscribe. There's a lot more your DNA isn't telling you. The next time you can't explain why you're anxious, why you overeat when nothing is wrong, why being alone feels like a threat even when you're perfectly safe. Remember, there was a time when the sky went dark for a decade, when your species was reduced to a few thousand starving people scattered across a dying planet. They survived, and they passed everything they had down to you. The cooperation, the resilience, the hunger, the fear. All of it is still running, whether you need it or not.